Hey there guys, welcome back to another deck profile with yours truly, Paul Reisman. Today we are going to be digging into my recent Reinhardt deck that we featured on the channel earlier this week. Without further ado, let's jump right into things.
Brought to you by Odyssey Games for pre-orders and sealed product, CCG Prime for tons of singles and supplies, Cardo Doko for international rulers looking for products, and FowlLibrary.com for articles and wonderful deck lists, as well as our guest lecturer members King Pearlshine, Vite Ramen, Mognite, and Darren Noblock. Class is in.
All right, folks, let's take a look at my Reinhardt control deck. So I am going to be struggling to call it Reinhardt control because in a lot of ways I don't think the deck actually does its namesake, but we'll get more into that as time goes on in this particular profile. But if you forgot who Reinhardt is, he's the guy who starts the game with 2 zones in his EX area, and then anytime an Ethereal Resonator would be put into the graveyard, it can be put into your EX area once per turn. So he's really helpful for that. Plus, you do have Child of the Ethereal Moon, which gives you another space. You can correct your magic stones, which is also really helpful. But then you also have the banish effect, which is really nice. Banish a Resonator, look at the top 3 cards of your deck, put 1 into your hand, 1 into the grave, and 1 to the EX area. Really helpful for banishing your Ethereal Defense Trooper. This card is really the backbone of the deck. It says you don't get to deal 400 damage, and whatever damage you're going to deal to me as long as I'm in the EX area, which is really important for the longevity of this particular card. Also, when it leaves the field, you draw a card. So the ideal here is you use Child of the Ethereal Moon to banish Defense Trooper, draw an additional card after that is resolved, and then you find a second Defense Trooper off the top of the deck. Then you're getting -8 damage from any source that your opponent deals with you, unless it's Electra. But we don't talk about her, right? We don't talk about Electra. Ethereal Princess is your other 1-drop. We do not have Lila, that's still combo banned with Ethereal Child, so what we do have is Ethereal Princess, one of the other backbone pieces of the deck as far as I'm concerned. This card is going to get real big real quick, and so in the meantime, you're going to be dealing 200 damage per turn per copy to your opponent. So a couple of these can actually do a lot of work. 2 of these means 800 damage a turn, which is a 5-turn clock, which is not nothing for a 1-drop. But if it does leave the field, your opponent has to discard a card, which can be really solid in the aggro matchup, because all of a sudden, yeah, you put some resources together to try and kill this thing, and you did, but oh yeah, your 1-for-1 is now a 2-for-1 card. Doesn't feel that great, does it? This card in the late game is also really solid because it gets that really nice stat buff from other Ethereals on the field and in the EX area. So this card is really solid for that. I decided to play 2 Aspiring Diva in the deck. Aspiring Diva is really solid because you get to look for some really pivotal chance that you want to play in this particular deck. And then you can banish for blue, which is really relevant in the case of your Soulle Absorption contract. It's really helpful for paying the awakening cost of your Death Scythe rebooted, as you saw in the feature match. It's really helpful for being able to make that a little bit easier to pay, and so Aspiring Diva is really solid for that. We're also playing 4 Cascade of Water Sire. This card is really good. I needed some interaction in the deck, and I was actually considering Fiola at one point, and then I recognized that, oh yeah, this card exists now. So this card is really helpful for that. It is an addition, so it doesn't have stats, and it does remove the top card of your deck from the game, which can be a little frustrating to deal with, but for the most part, it more than makes up for that in a lot of ways. This protects you from cancels, this protects you from board wipes, minus anything to do with the Reconnaissance Gears or Tinkerbell combo. This card is just really solid. It interacts with a lot of what your opponent is doing, especially contracts. That's also a real thing. Oan Reinhardt is probably the newest and most pivotal addition to the list. Not only do you get to have a 2-cost 9/9 enter your field, it is an ethereal, which means that it can go into your EX deck and come back later. It also has that really useful blue activate ability in that you can take an Ethereal Resonator from your graveyard, put it into the field, and then banish it, triggering its when this card leaves the field effect, which is really helpful. It also just puts that card into the EX deck, and it's once per turn, but it's not once per turn on your turn, right? So you can do it on your opponent's turn too. So there's ways for you to block certain things, have that card go to the graveyard, play Oan Reinhardt's effect, bring it back into the field, have it automatically banish and get an additional thing on at the end of the turn, right? So there's funny things you can do with that effect. I never found myself actually using those, mostly because I'm still in a lot of ways learning the intricacies of this deck. But Oan Reinhardt is definitely a welcome addition and is very helpful in the late game, and this is why. So Soulle Absorption, it can either do -6/-6 to your opponent's board, or if you have a bunch of stuff in your graveyard and you just want to load up your EX area so you can contract, it can do that. If you have 3 or more Ethereals, you can contract at that point. So that's really helpful. Plus when he comes in, the 400 stat line looks really small, doesn't it? Part of me wonders if they couldn't have even brought it down to 300, but that's, I don't know. The deck's fine as it is. I don't think they needed to nerf it any more than they already have. But 400 actually goes a long way, because you actually have Flying, Swiftness, and Bane, which has a lot of value to it. Whenever this card attacks, you get to put a card from your possession EX area into the field. It gains Swiftness until end of turn. Whenever an Ethereal Resonator you control attacks, recover this card. So you're going to be swinging with this card a whole lot. He's going to be doing a lot of Ghost Army swing at you shenanigans. It's very, very funny. Very solid card. We are playing 2 of the Ethereal Vampire. I'm not playing a lot of the 2-drops, and that may be a mistake. I don't know, but I just find myself relying less and less on the 2-drop Ethereals that are not Oan and Reinhardt. Ethereal Vampire, though, is really solid in my opinion, because if he does get put into the EX area, all of a sudden you are draining with your princesses, which is really solid. But it also deals 6 and gains you 6 when it leaves the field. So there's also a world in which you just let this thing go to the graveyard instead of going into your EX area and just bringing it back over and over with Oan Reinhardt to trigger that effect again and again and again every turn, which is funny to me. It's very funny to me. I'm also playing only 2 Dexias, and again, this might be a little bit of a hot take on my part, but Dexia is a really interesting combo card in a deck that is supposedly a control deck. I know we've talked about Reinhardt being a control deck in the past, but the more I look at this, the more I'm thinking a lot of the cards that Reinhardt has at his disposal are combo cards, and Dexia is one of those. So Dexia's Determination, if he's in the EX area, your ethereal triggers happen twice, which is really good. So you definitely want at least a couple of copies of Dexia for that effect alone. Not only that, he's quick cast, so that's really helpful. But then he also has this really nice enter effect, which is more of a combo effect where you can put an Ethereal Resonator from your hand into the field and then banish it, and if you do, draw a card. So there's really interesting things you can do with that in terms of Oan and Reinhardt. You can put them into the field and banish them immediately to get Oan from outside the game, which is really helpful sometimes. But he's also there just in case you just want to let him go to the graveyard and bring him back, so that you can just get more and more and more stuff in your EX area if you feel like the game is going to be taking a long time and you just need extra damage. That's kind of what Dexia is. Dealing with here. So he's interesting. He's still usable in my opinion, but I think the days of him being at 4 copies, in my opinion, with my experience of the deck so far, I would not play 4 copies currently. That's just me. We're playing 3 Kilo of Fossil Girl in the City to do some interaction in the below additions. A couple of cards, King Soulless Scream. I love this card right now because this deck in particular really likes to see more cards, and this is a really good way of doing that while also setting back your opponent. This is really a control card, right? This is not only giving me more tools to work with, but it's also setting my opponent back. This feels like a control card, right? Other things don't feel like control cards in this deck necessarily. They feel more like cards that say, I get a lot of benefit, but you don't not benefit, or like you don't have to take a step back because I took a step forward. I just took a step forward, and this card feels different in that way. So having something that -8s the board is really solid, especially in with some of these Grim Rulers that, you know, if they do Judgment and all of a sudden you have -8 on the board, they just die or they just look really weenie. That's kind of what King's Hopeless Scream does. In my opinion, card's really solid for that. I played 2 Death Scythe Rebooted. I wanted more win conditions in this deck, so this is the first of the secondary win conditions, right? So repairing Death Scythe is really good because it not only ramps you a deck, ramps you a stone at quick cast speed. If you awaken it, you can Judgment generically with any of your rulers that have partner, as long as you have a moon protection ruler on your side of the field. Happens to be that Reinhardt does. So Death Scythe Rebooted is really solid. You are probably choosing the put 10 +1/+1 counters on this card when it enters the field, or you are choosing that alongside draw a card, gain 1000 life. And usually I draw a card just because it's just more helpful to have more cards. And Reinhardt again likes to see more cards. But then you have a 17/17 flyer. That's a really solid win condition, generically speaking, right? So Death Scythe Rebooted, it's in here. I don't know if it's right or wrong, but it's something that I really enjoyed, and I definitely got it off against Ben, so it was really cool to see that. I'm playing 2 Never End. Again, I could be completely wrong here because these do turn your Ethereals into not Ethereals anymore, right? But Never End being in the deck just gave me a second, a third, I guess, win con, right? Ender draw card, has flying. It becomes a 15/15 with Eternal. Eternal flying 15/15 seems pretty good. So Never End is just one of the more generic blue boss monsters that we have in the game, and so I just felt like this card had a place, right? Especially when I was like struggling sometimes to like put damage on board or to make things scary for my opponent. This very much helps with that a little bit, but in a lot of ways I just don't feel like I need it sometimes. But it's there in case I do. I also struggled with removal in this deck at times, specifically targeted removal. Dexia's Ethereal Sword was not precise enough for me, so I wanted Ethereal Attack. Ethereal Attack is really solid because it can be free. If you dump a possession card if you dump one of the cards in your possession EX area into the grave. By the way, there are times in which you really whiff off of your Child of the Ethereal Moon, and you end up putting things like, I don't know, your Never End or your Aspiring Diva into the EX area because you didn't see any Ethereals, which feels really bad. So having a way to like clear space is also really nice, but at the end of the day, I just wanted instant speed, kill some stuff, especially against things like Electra. This was feeling really solid. I also wanted generic J-Ruler destruction with attack order. At one point I was playing against one of our folks at Locals, and they made an Abdul, and I had different cards in the deck at one point, and I was like, I just have no way of answering that. So putting in some generic removal for me felt like a huge piece. Attack order is really solid too because it is void, which means you can play it off of Aspiring Diva, as I mentioned a little bit before in the video, but it's relevant. And I've had that stuff happen to me before, so it's really solid for that. Magic Stone deck, because of Child of the Ethereal Moon, you are always going to be able to correct your mana. I don't think I knew that. I'm used to the fact being at the top of the card, and in my match against Ben, I don't think I read this, so I probably tapped stones and paid life with Moonshade when I really shouldn't have, but again, still getting used to this deck and getting used to how it operates and its intricacies. But there are a few Moonshades in here. They can be useful in case you need some additional green stones, but again, with your Moonchild, you're able to correct those into whatever you need in order to make use of the cards that you have in the game. I'm also playing 6 of the blue-black stones, 4 of the Foresee stones, 2 of the OG Dark Depth, and then just the 1 Darkness Moon Fragment. Again, you can correct the mana, and it's another Foresee stone. Really solid card. I don't know what else to say. The Foresee stones are probably the best stones we've seen in the game since 6 Sage Stone, so there you go. I do have a side deck for this, just in the off chance. that, you know, I did play this in a little bit more of a more professional capacity. And so obviously you have the one Asuka from outside the game that you want to play. I did want Life Drain because at times my locals does have Dark Tree show up, and that's not, you know, uncommon for us. So Lucifer is there to sort of help with the Life Drain alongside Ethereal of Solarisire. I'm not sure this is the right way to go. In fact, I'm not even sure this deck has a really good matchup against Dark Tree. I think it can suffer a little bit just because it doesn't have a lot of life loss options. So that's a little disconcerting, especially since I have no way of just like making tokens over and over and over again to sack them to this thing. I'm not entirely sure, but a Cannon Soldier that makes your opponent lose life seemed pretty solid for me. I played 2 Muse Staring At. This card is somewhat relevant, especially with some of the new Grim stuff that we do have out here. It coming into the field without being played for its full cost is somewhat relevant to some degree. And so this card is relevant to that degree, but other than that, it's not quite generic enough to warrant a spot in the main deck. So it is in the sideboard. Same thing with Ray Asnable. I played this in the main for a long time because I was like, oh, it's a control deck, so I need to play a good blue control card. This thing is going to stop enter abilities. It's not like this thing isn't doing that. There were times in which my opponent just played a big J ruler, and I just got this thing in a situation where it's like, sure, you don't get enter effects, but what are you going to do otherwise? You're not attacking with this thing, right? It was a good theory, but I do like the inheritance effect of paying the blue to cancel an enter ability. Just helpful to have to some degree, and I'm not entirely convinced that I need this, but it's there. However, a card that I will be playing in the sideboard for this deck for the foreseeable future is Essence of Athena's Power. This card has a lot of applications right now, and when I say that, I mean a lot of applications. Little did I know this card was so good, especially going into Judgment of the Rogue Planet, in which Solaria, who is constantly wanting to solarize things, really gets punished by this card. It sets them back a few turns, which is always helpful in this particular deck because Reinhardt likes saying, like, well, your turn didn't amount to much, did it? But in addition to that, against Arc, where you're starting off as Arc, getting rid of their satellites and putting those into the grave is really solid. Plus, going into Pilgrim Memories, we have decks with like Lumia that really like having cards in their RFG so they can play them with Lumia. We also have decks with like Scheherazade, which also like some cards being removed. There's a lot of decks right now that like cards being in the RFG or like cards being in the graveyard and not in the RFG. And so this card can really mess some folks up. It's like Evil Elemental Uprising, but has a bit more utility because it can mess with the RFG as well. So guys, this is the deck. Let me know what you think. I don't think it's necessarily a finished product. I think it's going to be evolving, moving this into my repertoire for the foreseeable future. I really do like Reinhardt. He's just a fun ruler. But let me know what you guys think down in the comment section down below. And while you're down there, if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you do that and ring that bell for more content like this. Hit the like button if you want to support the channel. Also, you can sign up and become a member of the channel if you want to support us more directly. That is always welcome, and we definitely appreciate it if you do. But until next time, guys, this has been Paul. Talk to you next time.